Sometimes the cruelest joke is the one destiny decides to answer. Olivia Carter lifted her phone with a grin that had taken years to perfect. The front camera reflected flawless makeup, carefully curled blonde hair, and the expensive dress their parents had bought without hesitation. Behind her, the elegant dining room of Blackwood House shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers that scattered warm light across polished marble floors. Every table was filled with wealthy professionals, social media influencers, and members of New Orleans elite who came for impossible reservations and whispered rumors about mysterious owners who were never photographed in daylight. Olivia angled the phone toward her friends, lowering her voice into a playful whisper. Just wait until Emma walks in. She still thinks this is a real blind date. Soft laughter rippled around the table. Someone nearly spilled champagne, trying not to laugh too loudly. Another guest had already opened a live stream draft, ready to capture the moment Emma realized she had become tonight's entertainment. Olivia smiled wider. Ever since childhood, everything had come naturally to her. Better grades without studying. Better clothes because their parents believed appearances mattered. Better opportunities because people always noticed confidence before kindness. Emma had always accepted second place with quiet grace, and somehow that made Olivia dislike her even more. She hated how strangers smiled at Emma. She hated how neighbors trusted Emma. Most of all, she hated that people remembered Emma's kindness long after they forgot Olivia's beauty. Across town, Emma Carter hurried through the humid Louisiana evening with one hand holding the strap of her faded purse and the other trying to smooth the wrinkles from a simple navy dress she had borrowed from a coworker. She had barely finished a double shift at Harbor Street Diner 15 minutes earlier. Her feet still ached from 8 straight hours of carrying heavy trays, and the scent of fresh coffee lingered faintly in her hair despite her best effort to freshen up in the employee restroom. She checked the address again. Blackwood House. Definitely the right place. Olivia had insisted this blind date came from one of her successful business friends. He's quiet, Olivia had said earlier that morning. A little awkward, honestly. You two might actually get along. Emma hadn't wanted to come. Blind dates weren't her thing. But saying no always seemed to disappoint people, and disappointing people had become something she tried very hard to avoid. She climbed the wide stone steps leading toward the entrance. 2 doormen in tailored black suits opened the massive doors before she even reached them. The warmth inside wrapped around her immediately. Soft piano music drifted through the enormous room, while servers moved with practiced elegance between candlelit tables. Emma instinctively looked down at her worn shoes. They suddenly felt far too ordinary against the gleaming marble beneath her feet. "Miss Carter," a hostess asked with a polite smile. Emma blinked. "Yes. Your guest has already arrived." That surprised her. Most people she knew were late to everything. She followed the hostess through the dining room, noticing conversations growing quieter as they passed. Some guests glanced toward the far corner with expressions she couldn't quite understand. Curiosity, respect, maybe even nervousness. She assumed someone famous must be dining nearby. They stopped beside a secluded table near the tall windows overlooking the rain-soaked streets below. A man stood as she approached. He looked to be in his early 30s, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit without a single wrinkle. Dark hair framed a face so remarkably composed it almost seemed carved from marble. His skin appeared unusually pale beneath the candlelight, while calm silver-gray eyes settled on Emma with an expression she couldn't immediately read. Not judgment, not amusement, simply quiet attention. Emma offered an apologetic smile as she pulled out her chair. "I'm so sorry I'm late. My shift ran longer than expected." For a brief moment, the man said nothing. Then something almost invisible softened in his eyes. "You apologized before sitting down," he replied in a calm, measured voice. "Most people apologize only after deciding whether someone is worth respecting." Emma laughed nervously. "Well, waiting isn't exactly fun." A faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, so brief, she almost believed she'd imagined it. "No," he said softly. "It isn't." Neither of them noticed Olivia quietly raising her phone from across the room, her thumb hovering above the record button as dozens of curious eyes slowly drifted toward the quiet table where a joke was about to begin. Emma relaxed a little as a server quietly filled 2 crystal glasses with sparkling water before disappearing as silently as he had arrived. She reached for the menu, then looked back at the man across from her. "I should probably introduce myself properly," she said with an embarrassed smile. "Emma Carter." He studied her for a heartbeat before extending his hand across the table. "Lucian." His handshake was warm despite the cool evening outside, firm without trying to impress her. Emma noticed there was no expensive watch, no flashy jewelry, nothing that suggested someone desperate to prove his success. It was oddly refreshing. "Only Lucian?" she asked. "That is enough for tonight." His answer carried the calm certainty of someone who never needed to explain himself. Emma smiled politely. "Mysterious." Olivia definitely left that part out. Lucian tilted his head slightly. "Your sister arranged this evening?" "My twin." Emma laughed softly. "Technically older by 7 minutes. She likes reminding me whenever she wins an argument." "Does she often arrange your life?" Emma hesitated. It was an innocent question, yet somehow it reached deeper than she expected. "She tries to help," she answered carefully. "Sometimes she forgets to ask what I actually want." Lucian did not reply immediately. His silver eyes remained on her with quiet focus, as though every word mattered. Emma was not used to that. Most people listened only long enough to prepare their own response. Somehow this stranger made silence feel comfortable instead of awkward. A waiter appeared beside the table. "May I recommend tonight's tasting menu, sir?" Before Lucian could answer, Emma quickly shook her head. "Actually, I think I will just have the grilled chicken sandwich if that is all right." The waiter froze for the briefest moment. It was the least expensive item on the menu. Emma noticed his hesitation and immediately felt her cheeks warm. "I am sorry," she added. "I know this place is nicer than I expected." Lucian closed the menu without even looking at it. "Then we will both have the sandwich." The waiter blinked in visible surprise. "Very good, sir." As soon as the server left, Emma looked genuinely confused. "You did not have to do that." "Why not?" "Because you probably came here expecting something much nicer." "Did I?" She laughed quietly. "Most people on blind dates try to impress each other. I have found that people are most honest when they are comfortable." Emma looked down at the candle between them, turning the cloth napkin in her hands. "Then I should warn you. I am not very impressive." Lucian's expression remained unreadable for only a second before he answered. "That depends on how one defines impressive." Across the dining room, Olivia narrowed her eyes. This was not following the script she had imagined. Emma was supposed to stumble through awkward conversation with an equally uncomfortable stranger while everyone laughed behind hidden cameras. Instead, the two of them looked relaxed. Olivia zoomed in with her phone. "Why are they smiling?" one of her friends whispered. "Give it another minute," Olivia replied confidently. "He probably has not started the joke yet." None of them noticed that several restaurant employees had quietly shifted their attention toward Lucian's table. Managers who had been supervising the evening now stood unusually still. Senior staff exchanged brief glances before lowering their eyes whenever they passed nearby. Even guests seated across the room unconsciously lowered their voices. Emma remained completely unaware of the subtle change surrounding them. She noticed only that Lucian had barely touched the glass in front of him. "You are not eating or drinking much," she observed. "Long day." For the first time that evening, something almost impossible flickered across his face. Surprise. Genuine surprise. "Why would you ask that?" Emma shrugged. "Because you look tired." The words landed between them with unexpected weight. Lucian's fingers became perfectly still against the edge of the table. Around the dining room, conversations continued, glasses clinked softly, and the pianist played another gentle melody. But to him the sound suddenly felt impossibly distant. No one had looked at him that way in a very long time. Lucian did not answer immediately. Instead, he held Emma's gaze with an expression so still it seemed untouched by time itself. Then, almost imperceptibly, he smiled. It was small, reserved, yet it transformed his entire face. "That may be the first honest observation anyone has made about me in many years," he said quietly. Emma chuckled, assuming he was joking. "You must know some very polite people. Perhaps too polite." Before she could respond, the waiter returned carrying 2 simple grilled chicken sandwiches arranged with careful precision. Emma looked relieved. "This actually looks perfect." Lucian noticed the genuine gratitude in her voice over something so ordinary. She thanked the waiter by name after reading the embroidered tag on his uniform. "Thank you, Daniel." The young waiter blinked in surprise before smiling naturally. "You are very welcome, Mississippi." As Daniel walked away, He glanced back once, clearly puzzled. Most guests at Blackwood House never noticed servers beyond placing their orders. Emma had noticed his name. Across the dining room, Olivia lowered her phone for a second. "Why is she acting like this is an actual date?" one of her friends whispered. "She has no idea." Olivia forced a laugh. "Relax. Watch this." She sent a quick text message. Almost immediately, another friend sitting closer to Emma's table stood up, pretending to recognize her. "Emma?" The woman called loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "I did not know they were still doing charity blind dates here." Several heads turned. Emma looked confused. "Sorry." The woman smiled with exaggerated sympathy. "Oh, I thought this was one of those events where lonely people get matched with strangers for fun." A few quiet laughs floated through the room. Emma felt heat rise into her cheeks, but refused to look away. "I think there has been a misunderstanding," she answered gently. "Maybe there has," the woman replied before walking back to Olivia's table, barely containing her laughter. Emma looked down for only a second before taking a slow breath. "I guess that explains a few things." Lucian watched her carefully. "You are embarrassed." "A little." She gave a tiny smile. "Mostly because I think my sister planned something I was not supposed to understand until now." "And you are not angry?" Emma considered the question. "Being angry usually takes more energy than I can afford." That answer lingered in the air. Lucian had witnessed kings declare war over smaller insults. He had watched powerful families destroy entire fortunes because of wounded pride. Yet this young woman simply accepted discomfort with quiet dignity. Something about that unsettled him far more than anger ever could. Nearby, the restaurant manager appeared from the main entrance. He adjusted his jacket the moment he noticed Lucian seated by the window. His confident stride immediately slowed. Without attracting attention, he discreetly signaled several senior employees. One after another, they quietly positioned themselves throughout the dining room, not as security, but as silent observers awaiting instructions that never came. Emma remained completely unaware. She had become focused on cutting her sandwich neatly in half. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course. What do you do for work?" For the briefest moment, Lucian almost laughed. No one had asked him that question in decades. They usually asked what companies he owned, how much he was worth, or whether impossible rumors about him were true. Emma simply wanted to know what he did. "I oversee a very old family enterprise," he replied. "Sounds complicated." "Sometimes." "Do you enjoy it?" His eyes drifted toward the rain sliding down the enormous windows. Beyond the glass, New Orleans glowed beneath wet streets and golden streetlights. "I have carried the responsibility for a very long time." Emma nodded as though that answer made perfect sense. "Then I hope someone tells you to rest once in a while." Lucian slowly turned back toward her. Once. Again she had unknowingly spoken words no one else ever dared say to him. Before he could answer, the enormous front doors opened. A sudden hush swept through the restaurant as several elegantly dressed guests entered together. The conversations around the room faded almost instantly. Olivia looked toward the entrance with growing excitement, convinced the next few minutes would finally humiliate her sister. She had no idea that everyone else's attention had shifted for an entirely different reason. The newcomers moved through the restaurant with effortless confidence, dressed in tailored black evening, where that somehow made every other guest appear ordinary. The manager personally stepped forward to greet them, lowering his head with unusual respect before quietly escorting them toward a private section near the back. None of the arriving guests looked around the room. None of them needed to. Their presence alone seemed to shift the atmosphere. Emma noticed the silence first. "Did something happen?" she asked softly. Lucian glanced toward the entrance for only an instant. "A few acquaintances have arrived." Emma followed his gaze. "They must be important. Some people believe they are." Before she could ask another question, Olivia stood from her table, smoothing her designer dress with theatrical confidence. "This is it," she whispered to her friends. "Do not stop recording." She walked directly toward Emma with a bright smile that looked convincing from a distance but felt rehearsed up close. "Emma," she called loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "I hope you are enjoying your surprise." Emma looked up, already understanding where the conversation was headed. "Olivia, come on. You cannot tell me you actually believe this was a serious blind date." A few nearby guests exchanged curious glances. Olivia laughed lightly, making sure her voice carried through the elegant dining room. "Everyone, this is my sister." I thought she deserved one exciting evening after spending every day working at the diner. Several of Olivia's friends laughed on cue. Someone quietly applauded. Emma's fingers tightened around her napkin, but her expression remained calm. If this was your idea of fun, she said gently, I wish you had simply invited me to dinner instead. Olivia blinked. That was not the reaction she wanted. There were no tears, no shouting, no dramatic scene for social media. She pressed forward anyway. Oh, do not be so serious. It was only supposed to be a joke. Besides, she glanced toward Lucian with an exaggerated smile. I am sure the gentleman we hired does not mind playing along for another minute. The words echoed farther than Olivia intended. Several servers immediately stopped walking. The restaurant manager slowly closed his eyes. One of the newly arrived guests quietly lowered his glass onto the table without making a sound. Emma turned toward Lucian, horrified. I am so sorry, she whispered. I did not know anything about this. If you were asked to participate, I apologize for wasting your evening. Lucian looked at her instead of Olivia. Do you believe you wasted my evening? Emma hesitated. I hope not. You have not. Olivia folded her arms, growing impatient. Seriously? You are still pretending? We offered you money to sit here. You can stop acting now. Silence. Absolute silence. Even the pianist's hands had frozen above the keys. Lucian slowly placed his folded napkin beside his plate with perfect composure. His movements were unhurried, almost graceful. Then he rose to his feet. Every employee in the restaurant immediately straightened where they stood. The manager lowered his head without being told. The elegantly dressed newcomers who had entered minutes earlier stood as one, each placing a closed fist over the center of the chest in perfect synchronization. Not one of them looked at Olivia. Their attention remained fixed entirely on Lucian. Emma stared around the room in complete confusion. What is happening? She whispered. Olivia forced a nervous laugh. Very funny. You can all stop now. No one moved. No one smiled. The silence became almost tangible. Lucian finally turned toward Olivia. His silver eyes were calm, neither angry nor amused, but they carried a quiet authority that seemed older than the building itself. Miss Carter, he said in an even voice, there appears to have been one misunderstanding this evening. Olivia swallowed. The confidence she had worn all night began to crack. Lucian continued without raising his voice. No one hired me to be here. At that exact moment, the restaurant manager stepped forward, his hands trembling ever so slightly as he bowed his head. Your Majesty, he said respectfully, please forgive this unfortunate disturbance. A collective gasp swept through the dining room as dozens of guests realized they had just witnessed something no newspaper, no television interview, and no public record had ever captured. Emma slowly looked from the manager back to Lucian, unable to reconcile the kind man who had shared a simple sandwich with the impossible title that had just echoed across the silent room. Emma remained seated, her hands resting quietly on the edge of the table as though standing too quickly might somehow wake her from an impossible dream. The words echoed through her mind with stubborn disbelief. Your Majesty. She had expected many surprises that evening. An awkward conversation, an embarrassing prank, maybe even a humiliating social media video. Never this. She looked at Lucian again, searching for any sign that this was still part of Olivia's elaborate joke. Instead, she found only the same calm expression that had been there from the beginning. Nothing about him had changed, only her understanding of who he truly was. Across the dining room, Olivia stared at the manager before forcing an uneasy laugh. Come on. Seriously? You all rehearsed this. No one answered. The elegantly dressed guests who had entered moments earlier remained perfectly still with their heads respectfully lowered. The servers stood silently beside their stations. Even the pianist kept his hands suspended above the keys, unwilling to interrupt the strange stillness that had settled over the room. Olivia looked around for someone, anyone, willing to laugh with her. No one did. One of her friends quietly lowered her phone, suddenly realizing that recording any further might not be a very good idea. Emma slowly rose from her chair. I think I should leave. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I did not mean for any of this to happen. Lucian looked toward her. Have you finished your dinner? Emma blinked. What? Your sandwich. She glanced at the untouched half still resting on her plate. No. Then there is no reason to leave hungry. The simplicity of his answer momentarily dissolved the tension surrounding them. Emma almost smiled despite everything. Olivia, however, felt her frustration boiling beneath carefully controlled words. "Are you honestly ignoring what just happened?" she demanded. "You let everyone think you are." She stopped herself before finishing the sentence. Lucian regarded her with the same composed attention he had given Emma all evening. "I let everyone believe whatever they chose to believe." His voice never rose. It did not need to. Truth has never depended upon introductions. Olivia folded her arms defensively. "Well, maybe people should not hide who they are." "Perhaps." Lucian nodded slightly. "Or perhaps people should not decide another person's worth before learning who they are." Those words settled over the dining room more heavily than any raised voice could have. Several guests quietly lowered their eyes. The manager exhaled almost silently, grateful that his king had chosen restraint instead of anger. Then one of the newly arrived gentlemen stepped forward. His charcoal suit was immaculate, and a silver crest gleamed discreetly beneath his lapel. He bowed respectfully toward Lucian before speaking. "Your Majesty, the council members have gathered in the East Salon. They are prepared whenever you wish." Lucian acknowledged him with the slightest inclination of his head. "They will wait." "Of course." The gentleman immediately stepped back without another word. Emma looked between them, increasingly certain she had wandered into a world she did not understand. "You have important people waiting," she said quietly. "You should probably go." Lucian studied her face. "Do you believe they are more important than honoring the person I invited to dinner?" Emma looked genuinely confused. "You invited me? I accepted your sister's arrangement after reviewing it myself." Emma frowned slightly. "You reviewed blind dates?" For the first time that evening, a faint warmth reached Lucian's eyes. Only one. Before Emma could ask what he meant, an older gentleman seated near the center of the dining room rose unexpectedly. His white hair framed a dignified face marked by age and quiet authority. He addressed Lucian with respectful formality. "Your Majesty, forgive my interruption." Lucian turned toward him. "Lord Hawthorne." The older man inclined his head before shifting his attention toward Emma. His expression was thoughtful rather than welcoming. "This young woman appears entirely ordinary." Several nearby guests became noticeably uncomfortable. Emma lowered her eyes, accustomed to hearing similar judgments throughout her life. Before she could dismiss the comment with another polite smile, Lucian answered in a voice so calm it carried effortlessly across the silent room. "There is nothing ordinary about a person who remains kind after being publicly humiliated." No one spoke. No one dared interrupt. Olivia felt the weight of every eye in the restaurant shifting away from Emma and settling squarely upon her. For the first time since planning the evening, she realized she was no longer controlling the story. She had only opened the door to something far older, far greater, and far beyond anything she had imagined. Emma wished someone would explain what was happening, yet every answer seemed to uncover an even larger mystery. She glanced toward the enormous windows where rain continued tracing silver lines across the glass. Less than an hour earlier, she had walked into Blackwood House believing she was meeting an awkward stranger arranged by her sister. Now an entire room had fallen silent because that same stranger had spoken a few calm sentences. None of it felt real. Lord Hawthorne continued observing Emma with measured curiosity rather than hostility. "Kindness is admirable," he said carefully. "But history has taught us that appearances often conceal dangerous truths." Emma immediately shook her head. "I think there has been another misunderstanding. I am just a waitress. I work double shifts. I rent a tiny apartment 3 blocks from Harbor Street. There is nothing mysterious about me." Several of the elegantly dressed guests exchanged quiet glances. Lucian remained perfectly composed. "She is correct," he said. "She has claimed nothing more." Lord Hawthorne inclined his head respectfully. "Your Majesty, I was not questioning her honesty." Before anyone could continue, another member of the distinguished group stepped forward. Unlike the others, she appeared younger, with dark hair gathered into a precise knot and calm blue eyes that seemed to notice details everyone else overlooked. Around her neck rested an antique silver pendant shaped like an unfamiliar crest. The moment she approached Emma, the pendant emitted the faintest shimmer beneath the candlelight. The woman stopped walking. Her expression changed instantly. She looked down at the pendant, then back at Emma. Again and again. "That is impossible," she whispered. Lucian noticed the change immediately. Lady Eleanor? She slowly lifted the pendant into her hand. The silver crest had become noticeably warmer, glowing with a soft white radiance that only those standing nearby could clearly see. Emma stared in confusion. Is something wrong with your necklace? Lady Eleanor did not answer her question. Instead, she spoke quietly toward Lucian. Your Majesty, the relic has awakened. Those words spread through the small, gathering faster than a sudden breeze. Lord Hawthorne's calm expression disappeared. Several council members exchanged deeply concerned looks. Even the restaurant manager looked as though he wished he were somewhere else entirely. Emma instinctively stepped backward. I really do not understand what everyone is talking about. Lady Eleanor gently closed her hand around the pendant, but the soft light continued glowing between her fingers. This relic has remained dormant for more than 3 centuries, she explained carefully. It reacts only when it recognizes an ancient blood oath. Emma blinked. Blood oath. A forgotten bond recorded long before modern history. Emma laughed nervously. I think you have the wrong person. My family cannot even agree on Thanksgiving dinner. We definitely do not have ancient anything. A few unexpected smiles appeared among the staff, but none of the council members laughed. Lucian stepped closer, careful not to invade Emma's space. Have you ever inherited jewelry from your grandparents? Emma thought for a moment. Only one thing. She reached beneath the neckline of her simple dress and pulled out a thin silver chain she always wore. Hanging from it was a small oval locket, old enough that its edges had become smooth with time. My grandmother told me never to sell it, even when money was tight. She said it belonged to someone in our family long before she was born. The instant the locket emerged into the candlelight, Lady Eleanor's pendant shone even brighter. A quiet gasp swept through the gathered council members. Lord Hawthorne took one slow step forward before stopping himself. Lucian's silver eyes remained fixed on the tiny heirloom resting against Emma's hand. He had seen thousands of priceless treasures collected across centuries, yet none had affected the ancient relic in Lady Eleanor's possession. Emma looked down at the old locket with growing uncertainty. It has never done anything before. Lucian answered softly, his voice carrying both calm and unmistakable resolve. Perhaps it was simply waiting for the right moment. Across the room, Olivia watched everything unfold with widening eyes. What had begun as a harmless prank had become something no recording could fully explain. For the first time in her life, she realized her sister might have been carrying a story far greater than either of them had ever imagined. The antique locket rested quietly in Emma's palm, yet the atmosphere surrounding it had changed completely. The soft white glow from Lady Eleanor's pendant refused to fade, illuminating the silver crest with a steady light that seemed almost alive. Emma looked from one unfamiliar face to another, hoping someone would finally tell her this was all an elaborate misunderstanding. Instead, every expression she met carried the same mixture of astonishment and caution. Lord Hawthorne slowly folded his hands behind his back. Your Majesty, if the relic is responding correctly, protocol requires that the artifact be examined by the council. Before sunrise. Emma frowned. Examined. Lady Eleanor spoke gently, noticing the concern in Emma's eyes. Only the heirloom, Miss Carter. No one wishes to make you uncomfortable. Before Emma could answer, another council member cleared his throat. He was tall, impeccably dressed, and carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to being obeyed. With respect, he said while addressing Lucian, ancient relics do not awaken without purpose. We cannot simply ignore centuries of law because this discovery happened during dinner. Lucian's expression remained calm. I have not suggested ignoring anything. Then permit the council to escort Miss Carter to the archive residence tonight. Emma immediately looked alarmed. Escort me where? The council member continued as though she had not spoken. The sooner we understand why the oath has resurfaced, the safer everyone will be. Emma instinctively closed her fingers around the locket. I am sorry, but I cannot disappear tonight. I have to open the diner at 7 tomorrow morning. My manager already covered part of my shift, so I could be here. A few restaurant employees exchanged surprised smiles. Even now, after everything she had witnessed, Emma was worried about arriving late for work. The council member seemed almost puzzled. Surely your employment is no longer the priority. Emma answered without hesitation. It pays my rent. The simple sentence lingered in the silence that followed. Lucian watched her with quiet admiration. Hundreds of years had taught him that power often changed people within moments. Wealth changed them even faster. Yet Emma still measured life by responsibility rather than opportunity. Lord Hawthorne observed the exchange carefully before turning toward Lucian once more. Your Majesty, I believe everyone here recognizes Miss Carter's integrity. However, the Council cannot ignore what has happened. We have waited generations for any sign connected to the old oath. Lucian slowly nodded. Nor will we. The Council member stepped forward again. Then we request custody of the locket until our historians complete their examination. Emma looked down at the small heirloom, resting against her fingertips. I cannot do that. Every eye turned toward her. She swallowed before continuing. My grandmother trusted me with it before she passed away. She asked me to keep it safe no matter what happened. I promised her I would. Her voice never rose. She simply spoke with quiet certainty. The council member appeared ready to object, but Lucian spoke first. A promise given to family deserves respect. His words carried effortless authority. The locket remains with Miss Carter. No one challenged him. Even those who clearly disagreed lowered their eyes. Olivia watched from across the dining room, unable to recognize the sister she thought she knew. Emma had always avoided arguments. She apologized too often, worried too much, and rarely insisted upon anything. Yet tonight she had quietly refused people whose influence seemed to extend far beyond ordinary society. Not because she was stubborn, but because she had made a promise. Lady Eleanor stepped closer with a reassuring smile. Miss Carter, may I ask one question? Emma nodded cautiously. Has anyone in your family ever spoken about a place called Ashmore Castle? Emma searched her memory. Then something unexpected surfaced. A forgotten childhood afternoon. Her grandmother sitting beside an old fireplace. Rain tapping gently against the windows. A bedtime story she had always believed was only a fairy tale. Emma looked back at Lady Eleanor, her eyes widening ever so slightly. My grandmother used to tell me that name, she whispered. She always ended the story the same way. She said one day the castle would remember our family before we remembered it. The candle flames flickered without warning. Around the room, no one spoke. Lucian held Emma's gaze with quiet certainty, realizing that the evening had only begun to reveal the truth that fate had been protecting for generations. Emma stood motionless as memories she had not visited in years drifted quietly back into her mind. She could almost hear her grandmother's gentle voice again, telling stories beside the old fireplace while rain tapped softly against the windows of their tiny house. As a child, Emma had imagined Ashmore Castle as nothing more than another fairy tale where forgotten kings and impossible promises belonged. Her grandmother had never laughed at those stories. She had spoken them with unusual care, always ending with the same quiet words. When the castle remembers your name, do not let fear choose your path. Emma had never understood what they meant. Until now. Lady Eleanor slowly lowered the glowing pendant against her chest. Then the story survived, she whispered. Lord Hawthorne looked toward Lucian with thoughtful concern. If her grandmother preserved the oral history, the blood oath was never truly lost. It was simply hidden. Several council members nodded in uneasy agreement. The younger councilman who had requested custody of the locket stepped forward once more. His tone remained respectful, but urgency had replaced formality. Your Majesty, every minute we delay increases uncertainty. If Miss Carter carries the final living connection to Ashmore, the council must begin the verification immediately. Lucian remained perfectly composed. Verification will happen. Then we should depart now. Lucian slowly turned toward him. Not tonight. The answer was quiet, yet absolute. The councilman hesitated. Your Majesty, Miss Carter has spent this evening believing she was walking into an ordinary dinner. She has been publicly embarrassed, unexpectedly introduced to our world, and confronted with questions she cannot possibly answer. She will not be overwhelmed further simply because history has decided to move faster than comfort. The dining room fell silent once again. Emma looked at Lucian with genuine surprise. No one had spoken on her behalf like that before. Most people expected her to adapt without complaint. Lucian had noticed something different. He had noticed she was human. Lady Eleanor offered Emma a reassuring smile. His Majesty is correct. Answers given in fear are rarely complete. Emma let out a slow breath she had not realized she had been holding. Thank you. Lucian inclined his head slightly. You have thanked everyone tonight except yourself. Emma looked puzzled. What do you mean? You have apologized for arriving late. You apologized for the prank. You apologized for the misunderstanding. You apologized for circumstances you did not create. Emma lowered her eyes, realizing he was right. It had become such a habit that she no longer noticed it. Lucian continued gently. Kindness should never require accepting responsibility for another person's choices. Across the room, Olivia heard every word. For the first time all evening, she stopped thinking about herself. She replayed every joke, every sarcastic comment, every moment she had expected Emma to quietly endure, because that was what Emma always did. Suddenly, none of it felt amusing. She slowly walked toward her sister, her footsteps echoing softly across the marble floor. Every guest watched in silence. Olivia stopped a few feet away. Her confident smile was gone. Emma. Her voice cracked slightly. I thought it would be funny. Emma looked at her twin for a long moment before answering. I know. I never thought. Olivia struggled to finish the sentence. None of us did, Emma replied softly. There was no anger in her voice. Only sadness. Lucian observed the exchange without interruption. Mercy freely offered often revealed more about character than justice ever could. Outside, the rain finally began to slow. Thin streams of water slipped from the tall windows as moonlight gradually broke through the clouds, casting pale silver reflections across the polished floor. At that exact moment, Emma felt unexpected warmth against her hand. She looked down. The old family locket resting in her palm had begun to glow with the same gentle white light as Lady Eleanor's pendant. This time everyone in the room could see it clearly. The delicate clasp slowly released on its own with a soft metallic click. Emma stared in astonishment as the tiny locket opened for what appeared to be the first time in generations. Inside, instead of a photograph, rested a perfectly preserved miniature map engraved on shimmering silver, and at its center one destination was marked by a single ancient symbol that matched the crest worn by Lucian. The tiny silver map shimmered beneath the candlelight, its delicate lines glowing with a quiet brilliance that no one in the dining room could explain. Emma stared at it in complete disbelief. She had opened that locket countless times as a little girl, hoping to find an old photograph or perhaps a note from someone in her family. It had never opened. Her grandmother had simply smiled and said, "It will reveal itself when it trusts the right moment." Emma had always believed that was another fairy tale. Apparently, it was not. Lady Eleanor stepped closer without crossing the respectful distance Lucian had quietly established around Emma. Her blue eyes carefully traced the engraved pathways. "The hidden passage," she whispered. "It still exists." Lord Hawthorne slowly removed his glasses, studying the ancient symbol with visible astonishment. "We believed every record had been destroyed." Several council members exchanged stunned glances. Centuries of unanswered questions suddenly seemed far less impossible. Emma looked from the map to Lucian. "I still do not understand why this has anything to do with me." Lucian answered honestly. "Neither do I. Not yet." That simple admission surprised everyone present. Kings were expected to possess answers. Lucian possessed something rarer: the willingness to admit when truth had not fully revealed itself. Emma looked down once more at the glowing locket before carefully closing it. The soft light slowly faded until only ordinary silver remained. She slipped the chain back beneath her dress and let out a quiet breath. "I think my grandmother knew this day would come." "I believe she did," Lady Eleanor replied gently. "She simply understood that some knowledge cannot be inherited. It must be discovered." The rain outside had stopped completely. Moonlight now streamed through the towering windows, covering the marble floor with pale, silver reflections. The tension that had filled the restaurant earlier had transformed into something quieter. Hope mixed with uncertainty. Olivia slowly approached her sister once more. This time she stopped without trying to justify herself. "Emma," she said softly, "I cannot undo tonight." Emma looked at her twin. For a long moment neither sister spoke. Finally Emma reached forward and gently squeezed Olivia's hand. "No," she answered. "But tomorrow does not have to look like today." Tears quietly gathered in Olivia's eyes. She nodded without speaking another word. It was the first sincere apology she had ever offered her sister, and Emma accepted it without asking for anything in return. Lucian watched the exchange with quiet admiration. Across centuries, he had witnessed kingdoms rebuilt through treaties and fortunes restored through ambition. Yet forgiveness remained one of the rarest strengths he had ever encountered. The restaurant manager finally allowed himself to exhale. Soft piano music returned to the dining room as conversations gradually resumed in respectful whispers. The extraordinary evening was coming to an end, but everyone present understood they had witnessed the beginning of something history would remember. Lucian stepped beside Emma as they walked toward the grand entrance together. A chauffeur had already opened the door, but Lucian did not move toward the waiting car. Instead, he looked at Emma. "You said you begin work at 7 tomorrow morning." Emma smiled sheepishly. "Unless my manager thinks tonight sounds too unbelievable to excuse being late." A faint smile appeared across Lucian's face. "Then I shall make certain you arrive on time." Emma laughed softly, the sound warm enough to make the enormous marble hall feel unexpectedly welcoming. They stepped outside into the cool Louisiana night. The streets glistened beneath fresh rain, and the city lights reflected like scattered stars across the pavement. Emma looked up at the clear sky before turning toward Lucian once more. "My life was very ordinary this morning." Lucian followed her gaze toward the moon shining above New Orleans. "Sometimes an ordinary day is simply the doorway to an extraordinary future." Far beyond the city skyline, hidden among ancient forests untouched by modern roads, towering stone walls stood beneath the same moonlight. At the highest point of Ashmore Castle, an enormous pair of iron gates that had remained sealed for generations slowly opened with a deep, echoing sound, as though the castle itself had recognized a name it had been waiting centuries to hear. And somewhere within those ancient halls, a story that had begun long before Emma Carter was born quietly awakened at last.